My name is Lisa, and I once believed my life was perfectly in order. I held a prestigious role as the head of marketing, shared a loving relationship with my husband, Ethan, and enjoyed the comfort of financial independence. Paying our mortgage on my own filled me with pride, adding to my sense of accomplishment. Family was central to our lives, with Ethan's younger brother, Brian, and their mother, Amy, as constant presences. After losing their father years earlier, the brothers' unwavering devotion to their mother was something I deeply admired. It was heartwarming and made me appreciate Ethan's dedication even more. Amy seemed to accept me at first. During family gatherings, she would chat with me about my work, often remarking with a nod, "Marketing, huh? Sounds important." Her comments reassured me that I was valued, and I felt welcome in Ethan's close-knit family. The early years of our marriage were filled with joyful weekends, festive holiday meals, and lively game nights. I fondly remember one Thanksgiving at Amy's house, where laughter and chatter filled the air, making me feel like I truly belonged. But everything began to change during a New Year's Eve party. While refilling my wine glass in the kitchen, I overheard Amy mocking Julie, a single mother struggling to make ends meet, commenting on her inexpensive dress and implying she didn't belong. The words stung, not because they were directed at me, but because they revealed a side of Amy I hadn't seen before. What I once dismissed as harmless teasing now seemed cruel. As time went on, these snide remarks became more frequent. Amy would huddle with Ethan and Brian, whispering and laughing at others' expense. It was uncomfortable to witness, and I found myself questioning the family dynamics I had once admired. The breaking point came one Easter Sunday when Amy openly criticized a relative's financial decisions in front of everyone. Unable to hold back, I stood up and confronted her, calling out the rudeness of her remarks. The room fell silent. Amy, dripping with sarcasm, dismissed my concerns, saying I was too sensitive. I turned to Ethan for support, but he stayed quiet, his eyes avoiding mine. After that, family gatherings became unbearable. I often found myself alone, sipping my drink, while Ethan stayed by his mother's side. Occasionally, he'd glance at me with an apologetic look, but he never stood up for me. One evening, after yet another tense dinner, I confronted him. "Why can't you ever stand up to her?" I asked, my frustration spilling over. Ethan sighed and ran a hand through his hair. "She's my mother, Lisa. What do you expect me to do?" "I expect you to tell her she's being cruel. I expect you to stand by me," I said firmly, but he never did. Eventually, I started avoiding family events, coming up with excuses, work emergencies, migraines, anything to escape the judgment and cold stares. Just as I thought things couldn't get more strained, life took an unexpected turn. I was pregnant. When I saw the 2 lines on the test, my hands trembled. I called for Ethan, who rushed in, concern etched on his face. When I showed him the test, his reaction, a mixture of shock and tentative relief, gave me a fleeting hope that this baby might heal the growing rift between us. The pregnancy, however, was far from easy. I suffered constant nausea and dizziness, with the looming threat of miscarriage hanging over me. My health deteriorated to the point where I had to quit my job and go on bed rest. A rare complication caused my eyesight to worsen, potentially permanently. Through it all, Ethan seemed to drift further away. He came home late, or not at all, leaving me to face these challenges alone. The day of my C-section arrived sooner than expected due to my worsening vision, which made natural birth too risky. Lying on the operating table, I was consumed by a swirl of fear and anticipation, unsure if this new chapter would bring healing or only deepen the cracks in our lives. When I asked for Ethan after the surgery, the nurse informed me he had chosen to wait outside. The procedure itself went smoothly, and hearing my son's first cries was a transcendent moment. My heart overflowed with love and awe at this new life, but the joy was short-lived. Ethan eventually appeared in the recovery room, his expression clouded with discomfort and irritation. "Lisa, we need to talk. This isn't right," he said abruptly, his words cutting through my fragile state. He criticized the necessity of my surgery, dismissing it as unnecessary, and lamented that men shouldn't be present during childbirth, as it went against some outdated norm. His words struck a painful chord, leaving me stunned. Before I could respond, he stormed out, muttering that the hospital environment was too overwhelming for him. I lay there, reeling, not just from his words, but from the realization that the man I once loved deeply was no longer the partner I needed. The weeks that followed were a blur of sleepless nights and constant feedings. Ethan's presence became increasingly rare, and when he was around, his lack of support was glaring. One night, as our baby cried inconsolably, Ethan groaned from the bedroom. "Can you shut him up?" he growled. "I'm trying," I replied, exhaustion thick in my voice. He's teething. It hurts him. Ethan's patience was non-existent. All you do is focus on the kid. What about me? What about our sex life? I was floored by his insensitivity, still recovering from major surgery and running on fumes. His complaints felt like a cruel reminder of how far we had drifted apart. As the weeks turned into months, Ethan's dissatisfaction only grew. One evening, while I was soothing our 7-month-old, he announced, "You need to go back to work." I stared at him, shocked. "But the baby? We'll hire a nanny." He interrupted sharply, "We can't keep living like this. We need the money." Though I wanted to argue that our son needed me, and I wasn't ready to leave him, the cold resolve in Ethan's eyes silenced me. With a heavy heart, I began job hunting. Finding work with my compromised vision was challenging, but eventually, I secured a position at a smaller company, though the pay was far less than before. When I shared the news with Ethan, his reaction was predictably dismissive. "That's it?" he scoffed. "We're paying a nanny for this?" Tears stung my eyes. "I'm doing my best, Ethan. It's not easy with my eyesight," I pleaded. "Excuses," he muttered before walking away, leaving me crushed and alone in my efforts. This became my new reality. Mornings were a frantic rush to work, guilt gnawing at me as I left my son with the nanny. My days were a struggle, navigating my job with limited vision, and my evenings were a constant battle for my son's attention amidst Ethan's growing resentment. Time blurred together, days turned into weeks, and weeks into years. Before I knew it, 3 years had passed since my son's birth, each one marked by the strain of work, motherhood, and an ever-widening chasm between Ethan and me. I cherished my son deeply and found immense joy in witnessing his milestones. Yet, family gatherings remained a source of stress, especially due to Amy's behavior. She would play the role of the doting grandmother when others were around, but her disinterest was unmistakable. "Come to Grandma," she cooed in a syrupy voice, arms outstretched toward my son. Yet he clung to me, turning his face away from the woman he barely knew. Amy's expression soured, and her voice grew sharp. "What have you been telling him about me?" she accused. "You're turning my grandson against me." I sighed, weary. "He just doesn't know you well, Amy. If you visited more often, don't you dare blame this on me," she snapped, cutting me off before storming out to complain to Ethan. Then, one ordinary Tuesday morning, my world tilted again. Holding a pregnancy test in my trembling hands, I stared at the positive result. My heart pounded with a mixture of fear and uncertainty. My first pregnancy had been so fraught, my health so compromised. Could my body handle another? As I pieced together the timeline, it dawned on me that I was already well into my first trimester. The decision, it seemed, had been made without my full awareness. With shaking hands, I dialed Ethan at work. "What is it?" he asked, his tone impatient. "Ethan, I began, my voice faltering. There was a pause before he replied dismissively. "Look, Lisa, I'm busy. We'll talk later. Just don't quit your job, okay? We can't afford that." The line went dead, leaving me staring at the phone, feeling lonelier than ever. Thankfully, this pregnancy proved less arduous than my first. The morning sickness was manageable, and my vision remained stable, allowing me to continue working. I was determined to support my growing family. Yet, as my belly grew, the distance between Ethan and me seemed to grow even more. He spent increasing amounts of time at his mother's house, often returning home late. One evening, exhausted from managing our toddler and my pregnancy, I mustered the courage to ask Ethan for help. As he walked through the door, I said, "Hey, can you read him a story? I'm so tired." Ethan glanced at us, then at his watch. "Can't. I promised Mom I'd help move some furniture. Don't wait up." And with that, he was gone, leaving me alone with our son and my tears. By the 7th month of my pregnancy, Thanksgiving was upon us. I busied myself with preparations, and soon, guests began to arrive. My parents pitched in immediately, filling the house with warmth and the comforting buzz of chatter and laughter. Just before dinner, the doorbell rang again. It was Brian, Ethan's younger brother, and he wasn't alone. "Everyone, this is Christine," Brian announced, introducing his fiancée. The room's mood shifted to joyous congratulations. Amy arrived shortly after, her eyes lighting up at the sight of Christine. Throughout dinner, Amy lavished Christine with attention, peppering her with questions about her job. "A manager at a national bank? How prestigious," Amy gushed, clearly impressed. Then, in a voice loud enough for everyone to hear, Amy said, "Christine here makes $220,000 a year." Now that's the kind of daughter-in-law I've always dreamed of, smart, beautiful, successful. Her words hit me like a slap, especially when she threw a pointed look my way and added, unlike some people, who can only pop out babies and breed poverty. The sting of her words cut deep, but I swallowed my pain, determined not to let her see me falter. I felt my cheeks flush with humiliation. My mother, sitting beside me, bristled, ready to defend me, but I gently placed a hand on her arm, silently urging her not to escalate the situation. Amy, sensing her advantage, continued with her voice dripping in faux sweetness. You know, she said, looking around the room, why don't we continue this lovely evening at that new restaurant downtown? My treat, of course. Before I could process what was happening, Amy, Ethan, Brian, and Christine were heading out the door. Ethan didn't even glance back. The festive spirit drained from the room, and soon, one by one, the other guests began to leave, offering polite but thin excuses. Only my parents stayed behind, their presence a silent show of support, yet I declined their offers to help clean up, insisting they needed to rest. After they left, I sank onto the couch, my tears falling unchecked. The silence of the house was deafening, broken only by my sobs. My hand rested on my growing belly as I grappled with the overwhelming reality of how my life had spiraled to this point. Hours passed. The sky began to lighten when I heard the front door creak open. Ethan stumbled in, reeking of alcohol and cigarette smoke. He didn't say a word, heading straight to the bedroom without so much as a glance in my direction. Shaking, I picked up my phone and mindlessly scrolled through social media, and there it was, photos of Amy, Ethan, Brian, and Christine at an upscale nightclub. They were all smiles, the caption cutting like a knife, best Thanksgiving ever with my real family. As my due date approached, a mix of excitement and dread weighed heavily on me. The doctors had scheduled another C-section due to the short interval since my last. I tried to focus on the arrival of our baby, but Ethan's growing distance loomed like a dark shadow over my thoughts. One cold winter afternoon, I noticed Ethan unpacking bags full of summer clothes. Confused, I asked, "What's all this?" "Just saw a good sale," he replied casually, avoiding my gaze. "Thought I'd update my wardrobe." Something didn't sit right, but with the baby's arrival so close, I pushed my suspicions aside. I had been diligently saving to cover the mortgage, bills, and even a babysitter for our 4-year-old. Thankfully, my workplace had approved 3 months of unpaid leave, but the weight of responsibility felt heavier than ever. Then, just 5 days before my scheduled C-section, chaos erupted. I was resting when Ethan and Amy burst through the door, urgency written across their faces. Following them to our bedroom, I watched in shock as Ethan hurriedly packed the new clothes. "What are you doing?" I asked, my voice rising with panic. "We're all going to Brian's wedding in Hawaii," Ethan replied curtly, tossing shirts into a suitcase. My heart pounded. "But my C-section is in 5 days. Who's going to take care of our son?" "You'll manage. You always do," Ethan said coldly, zipping up his suitcase with finality. Before I could argue further, Ethan and Amy were out the door, leaving me standing there, stunned and breathless. Reality crashed over me like a tidal wave. Frantic, I checked our joint account, and my heart sank. It was empty, every dollar I had saved was gone. With trembling fingers, I called Ethan. He finally answered, snapping, "What?" "The money, Ethan. All our savings, where is it?" I stammered, my voice barely steady. There was a pause before his cold laughter rang out. "We needed it for Brian's wedding gift. Don't be so greedy, Lisa." Then the line went dead. Before I could process his words, a sharp pain tore through my abdomen. Looking down, I saw a puddle forming at my feet. My water had broken. Panic gripped me as I realized the imminent danger. My previous C-section scar put me at high risk. Clutching my phone with one hand and my belly with the other, I dialed emergency services. The hospital was a blur of doctors shouting and machines beeping. Hours later, I woke to the rhythmic sound of monitors and my mother's tear-streaked face hovering over me. "Lisa," she whispered, squeezing my hand, "you're okay. The baby's okay." Slowly, the gravity of what had happened set in. I had almost lost my life, and my baby. 5 days after the emergency C-section, I was recovering faster than expected. The doctors were impressed, and I was cleared to go home. Yet during that time, Ethan didn't call, not once, not to check if I was alive, not to ask about his newborn son. That's when I knew our marriage was over. I reached out to my parents, asking if I could stay with them. They welcomed me and my boys without hesitation. providing not just a home but the emotional support I desperately needed. While they doted on their grandsons, I began resting and researching divorce lawyers, quietly gathering the necessary financial documents. A week after I left the hospital, Ethan finally called. I ignored the first 5 calls but answered on the 6th. "Where the hell are you? Why aren't you at home?" he demanded, his tone laced with anger and confusion. Calmly, I replied, "I'm at my parents' house with our sons. I've filed for divorce." His reaction was a mix of disbelief and mockery. "Divorce? Are you kidding me? After everything I've done for you?" He laughed bitterly. "Everything you've done?" I snapped. "Like abandoning me before I gave birth? Like stealing our savings?" "Oh, get over it," he scoffed. "I'll pay you back. Besides, I don't even want to see you again. You know why? Because I'm going to be rich." He rambled on about a job offer from Brian's new wife, Christine, who had promised to make him wealthy through some financial venture. "You never believed in me, Lisa," he spat. "You always held me back. Well, guess what? I'm free now, and you're just a loser who can't see potential when it's right in front of her." The divorce was swift. Ethan didn't contest much. He returned the money he had taken and was ordered to pay alimony. Since I had been solely responsible for the mortgage payments, the judge awarded me the house. The day I returned to what was now solely my home, Ethan was packing his belongings. As I entered with my toddler and newborn, he sneered. "Enjoy this dump while you can," he jeered. "I'll be in a mansion soon, swimming in cash. You'll see what you missed out on." As he left, a profound sense of relief washed over me. The house felt brighter, freer, finally rid of his shadow. A year and a half later, life had settled into a steady rhythm. I balanced work and motherhood. It wasn't always easy, but we were happy, healthy, and thriving. Then, one ordinary Tuesday, a news alert flashed on my phone. My jaw dropped as I read the headline, "Local banker exposed as fraud leaves family in ruins." Christine, the so-called financial genius, had orchestrated an elaborate scam. She had convinced Ethan, Brian, and Amy to invest in a non-existent company, even taking out massive loans to fund Brian and Christine's extravagant Hawaii wedding, the very event Ethan had abandoned me for. Christine wasn't a banker at all. The office she had shown them was a short-term rental, part of her elaborate con. She vanished with millions, leaving behind nothing but forged documents and shattered dreams. Ethan and Brian were left destitute, their debts unmanageable. Amy lost her home, her car, and even basic belongings. Through the grapevine, I learned she had taken a cashier's job, struggling to afford rent and groceries. Then my phone rang. It was Amy. Against my better judgment, I answered. "Lisa," she began timidly, her usual commanding tone gone, "we need your help. The children need their father and grandmother. You can't turn your back on family in times like this." I took a deep breath, memories flooding back, being humiliated, left alone while pregnant, my savings stolen. "Family?" I replied firmly. "You weren't concerned about family when you left me pregnant and in danger. You weren't concerned about family when you helped steal my savings. You weren't concerned about family when you belittled me." Amy tried to interrupt, but I pressed on. "I'm sorry for what you're going through, but I'm not responsible for the choices you, Ethan, and Brian made. My priority is my children, and I won't expose them to the instability you've brought upon yourselves. Please, don't contact me again." I ended the call and immediately blocked her number. As I set the phone down, a weight lifted from my shoulders. It was finally, truly over.